Yeah, so the plan is to completely close down the Ford plant, the Louisville assembly plant near the airport, for more than 8 months. Are you confident at this point that there won't be any price increases from Ford for trucks or cars this summer? I can't say that with certainty. What I mean is, I'm not going to give specific details about our pricing strategy. New auto prices are rising due to tariffs affecting imported materials, and incentives are decreasing. Some prices have already gone up. Tariffs were originally meant to protect American industries by raising the costs of foreign goods and promoting domestic production. However, they've had unintended consequences, increasing costs for U.S. manufacturers like Ford, leading to plant closures and job losses. Automakers have struggled with profitability, either raising prices for consumers or cutting jobs. Supply chain disruptions have worsened, affecting dealerships and suppliers. Instead of stabilizing the industry, tariffs have caused instability, layoffs, and economic uncertainty. Trump imposed a 25% tariff on imported cars and parts to reduce dependence on foreign manufacturing and boost U.S. production. While aimed at China and Mexico, major exporters to the U.S., these tariffs resulted in higher costs and supply chain disruptions for automakers. Many automakers, including Ford and General Motors, depended heavily on imported parts to build vehicles efficiently and affordably. However, the implementation of tariffs caused the cost of these components to rise sharply. As a result, companies were forced to either increase vehicle prices or absorb the losses. The consequences extended beyond the automakers themselves. Suppliers faced rising costs, leading to layoffs and reduced output. Dealerships encountered inventory shortages as manufacturers adjusted production strategies, and consumers experienced higher prices, with new car costs jumping over 2.5% in a single month. The tariffs also disrupted North America's integrated auto supply chain, affecting trade relationships and pushing companies to reconsider global production strategies. Some automakers shifted manufacturing overseas to avoid tariffs, while others halted exports to key markets like China. Despite warnings from industry leaders about the long-term economic damage, former President Trump held firm, insisting the tariffs were necessary to protect American jobs. However, the results included job losses, growing uncertainty, and declining auto sales, raising doubts about the effectiveness of the policy. Breaking news confirmed the shutdown of GM's Cami plant, with Ford also planning to close its Louisville assembly plant for 8 to 10 months. Ford's factories in Michigan and Chicago had already shut down, displacing thousands of workers. These closures were largely driven by rising production costs, tied to tariffs on imported parts. The resulting economic ripple effect hit suppliers, dealerships, and local communities hard. Ford was forced to overhaul its production strategy to cut losses, while GM responded by laying off workers and shifting manufacturing to different locations. Stellantis also paused operations at its assembly plants in Windsor, Canada, and Toluca, Mexico, citing the 25% tariff on imported vehicles as the cause. The Windsor facility, which produces models like the Chrysler Pacifica and Dodge Charger, Daytona EV, was idled for 2 weeks, while the Toluca plant, home of the Jeep Compass and Wagoneer SEV, was shut down for a month. These moves affected thousands of employees, including 4,500 hourly workers in Canada and 900 in U.S. support roles. Stellantis executives said they were still evaluating the long-term effects of the tariffs and may make further changes to production. Auto parts suppliers, key producers of steel, aluminum, chips, and batteries, were hit hard as well. Many struggled to stay profitable due to higher material costs, resulting in job cuts and temporary shutdowns. The broader disruption in supply chains caused delays in vehicle production and uncertainty for dealers and buyers alike, with some suppliers pausing operations until clearer trade policies emerged. New car prices surged by over 2.5% in a single month, one of the sharpest increases in recent history, driven largely by tariffs imposed on imported auto parts and vehicles. These tariffs, introduced as part of a broader trade policy aimed at protecting domestic manufacturing, had the unintended effect of dramatically increasing production costs for automakers. Companies like Ford, which rely on international supply chains to maintain cost efficiency, were hit hard. In response, many manufacturers were forced to adjust their pricing strategies to avoid deeper financial losses, leading to direct price hikes on new vehicles. The impact was quickly felt at dealerships. Across the United States, inventory shortages became widespread as automakers scrambled to adapt their production schedules to the new economic reality. Popular models became harder to find, and buyers were often left facing limited choices or extended wait times. The uncertainty surrounding the future of tariffs created a sense of urgency among consumers, sparking a short-term buying frenzy. Many rushed to purchase vehicles before prices rose even higher, further straining dealership inventories. Ford responded to the rising costs by increasing prices on three of its models produced in Mexico: the Mustang Mach-E electric SUV, the Maverick compact pickup, and the Bronco Sport crossover. Depending on the model and the trim level, price increases ranged from $200 to $2,000. Although Ford acknowledged that tariffs were a major factor in the price adjustments, the company clarified that it had not passed the full cost onto consumers, absorbing some of the financial burden internally. Still, the combination of limited supply and rising prices led to growing frustration among buyers. Many consumers began re-evaluating their purchasing decisions. Some opted to buy used vehicles instead of new ones, while others chose to postpone their purchases altogether in hopes of future price reductions or policy reversals. The overall market became increasingly unpredictable. Industry analysts warned that if tariffs remained in place long-term, the U.S. could see auto sales decline by more than 1 million vehicles annually. This sobering outlook triggered a sharp reaction on Wall Street. Auto stocks dropped as investors weighed the implications of increased costs, disrupted supply chains, and shrinking consumer demand. Major players like Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis saw their share prices fall, while even Tesla, despite not producing vehicles in Mexico or Canada, experienced a dip in stock value due to its reliance on imported components. In an attempt to mitigate the impact of tariffs, some automakers began shifting production to alternative countries, not subject to the new trade barriers. Others made the difficult decision to cancel exports to important global markets like China. However, relocating production was no easy fix. Moving manufacturing back to the U.S. required massive investment in domestic infrastructure, workforce training, and regulatory compliance. The result was a mixed economic picture. While some regions benefited from new investments and factory openings, others suffered devastating job losses due to plant closures. States that have long been industrial hubs, like Michigan, Ohio, and Indiana, were hit especially hard. Thousands of auto workers found themselves out of work as facilities shut down or downsized operations. For many who had built lifelong careers in the automotive sector, the transition was abrupt and painful. Job retraining options were limited, and comparable employment opportunities often didn't exist in affected communities. These hardships sparked public and political debate over the real impact of tariff policies on American workers. Despite the original intent of protecting domestic jobs and revitalizing American industry, the immediate consequences of the tariffs told a different story. Rising prices, factory shutdowns, job losses, and economic instability. What was meant to strengthen the auto industry instead introduced volatility and raised serious questions about the long-term sustainability of such trade strategies. As the auto industry continues to grapple with the fallout, one question looms large. Should the United States reconsider its approach to trade and industrial policy to better support a competitive and stable automotive future? Ford is undertaking a sweeping transformation of its business model as it navigates rising production costs, unstable trade policies, and a shifting automotive landscape. In response to weakened demand for fully electric vehicles and the rising cost of imported components due to tariffs, Ford is pivoting toward hybrid technology, shelving its plans for a U.S. all-electric three-row SUV and delaying the launch of its next-generation electric truck, known as Project T3, until late 2027. Instead, the company is doubling down on hybrids and plug-in hybrids across key models like the Ranger pickup and expanding its hybrid offerings across popular SUVs to benefit from U.S. tax incentives under the Inflation Reduction Act and mitigate global supply chain risks. Ford is relocating Mustang Mach-E battery production from Poland to Michigan in 2025 and scaling operations at its Blue Oval SK battery joint venture in Kentucky, which will begin supplying new battery cells for the E-Transit and F-150 Lightning. The automaker is also preparing for the launch of its massive Blue Oval City complex in Tennessee, slated to become operational in 2025, where it will build electric trucks and batteries, marking the company's single largest manufacturing investment to date. Meanwhile, Ford continues to invest in production infrastructure, including a major expansion of its Ohio assembly plant to produce electric commercial vehicles. Abroad, Ford is aggressively retooling its European strategy, aiming for an all-electric passenger vehicle lineup by 2030, and has begun phasing out traditional models on the continent to make room for new EVs like the electric Puma and revived Capri. However, the company's path is not without turbulence. Labor disputes, especially those involving the UAW, are complicating its unionized production footprint, leading to a broader reassessment of where and how Ford builds its vehicles. Despite these challenges, Ford remains committed to evolving its product portfolio and manufacturing strategy to remain competitive in a fragmented and unpredictable global market. As of 2025, Ford finds itself navigating a complicated landscape of strong sales momentum in some areas while contending with major financial and strategic headwinds. The company reported a 16.3% year-over-year increase in U.S. vehicle sales as of May, driven largely by the continued popularity of its F-Series trucks and a notable 29% surge in hybrid sales, reflecting a consumer shift toward electrified vehicles with practical fuel efficiency. However, Ford's electric vehicle EV sales dropped by 25%, underscoring the growing hesitancy in the fully electric segment amid rising prices, infrastructure concerns, and shifting consumer preferences. Compounding this challenge is the economic impact of newly imposed tariffs, which are expected to cost Ford $1.5 billion this year alone, contributing to a 65% decline in first-quarter profits and prompting the company to suspend its full-year financial guidance due to mounting uncertainty. In response, Ford is recalibrating its strategy, delaying its next-generation electric truck, Project T3, until late 2027, and shifting battery production for the Mustang Mach-E from Poland to Michigan to capitalize on U.S. tax incentives under the Inflation Reduction Act. The automaker is now placing greater emphasis on hybrid vehicles as a more immediate and profitable bridge between internal combustion and full electrification. Looking forward, while analysts still predict a possible stock price rebound by the end of 2025, Ford's longer-term ambitions, such as producing 2 million EVs annually by 2026 and achieving a 10% operating margin, appear increasingly difficult to meet in the face of volatile trade policy, declining EV demand, and mounting production costs. The next few years will likely require Ford to continue restructuring, streamline operations, and navigate economic instability while trying to preserve market share in a rapidly evolving global auto industry. Ford's revolution in the EV industry has been ambitious, bold, and at times turbulent as the company attempts to redefine itself for a future dominated by electric mobility. Recognizing early on that legacy automakers must evolve or risk irrelevance, Ford committed billions of dollars to electrification, launching the Ford Model E division to spearhead its EV strategy. Flagship models like the Mustang Mach-E, the F-150 Lightning, and the E-Transit van were positioned not just as electric alternatives, but as strong contenders in key segments traditionally dominated by gasoline-powered vehicles. The F-150 Lightning, in particular, marked a historic shift, bringing electrification to the best-selling vehicle in America, signaling Ford's intention to mainstream EVs rather than treat them as niche products. Ford's approach aimed to leverage its manufacturing strength, iconic brands, and dealership network to challenge both legacy rivals and EV-native companies like Tesla. Massive investments were made in U.S.-based battery plants and mega campuses like Blue Oval City in Tennessee, designed to vertically integrate battery and EV production and qualify for domestic manufacturing incentives under the Inflation Reduction Act. At one point, Ford announced a goal to produce 2 million EVs annually by 2026 and reach a 10% profit margin on its electric lineup, figures that showcased the scale of its ambition. However, the revolution has not been without setbacks. While initial EV sales surged, recent years have seen slowing demand, rising costs, and price wars, especially in the face of aggressive moves by Tesla and affordable competition from Chinese automakers. In response, Ford has pivoted its strategy by delaying the launch of its next-gen EVs, pulling back on production targets, and investing more heavily in hybrid vehicles as a transitional step. Yet, the revolution continues. Ford is now reworking its EV platforms to be more cost-efficient, doubling down on U.S. battery production and refining its software and digital ecosystem, knowing that the next frontier is not just electrification, but integration of mobility, data, and autonomy. Ultimately, Ford's revolution in the EV space has been defined by its willingness to take risks, challenge conventions, and adapt rapidly. While the path forward is no longer a straight line to full electrification, the company remains a central player in the evolving electric vehicle landscape, determined to carve out a sustainable, competitive future in a high-stakes global race. Ford's dealership network in the U.S. is undergoing a major transformation as the company adapts to a rapidly changing auto industry, especially with the shift toward electric vehicles, EVs, direct-to-consumer, sales models, and tightening profit margins. Traditionally one of the largest and most robust dealer networks in America, Ford has recently faced tension with its dealerships over the rollout of its EV sales strategy. In 2022, Ford introduced the Model E Certified program, which required dealers to invest between $500,000 and $1.2 million in EV infrastructure, such as chargers, training, and digital tools, in order to be eligible to sell EVs like the F-150 Lightning and Mustang Mach-E. This move was seen by many dealers as aggressive and top-down, leading to legal challenges and even pushback from state dealer associations. Some dealerships chose to opt out of the EV program altogether, creating a fragmented landscape where not every Ford dealer can sell or service electric models, potentially undermining customer trust and accessibility. In 2024, amid growing dissatisfaction and declining EV sales, Ford paused some of the stricter requirements of the program, giving dealerships more flexibility and time to adapt. Still, the strain between Ford corporate and its dealers remains, particularly as the company experiments with a Tesla-style direct sales model for certain EVs, something that fundamentally threatens the traditional franchise system. Ford has promised not to abandon its dealer network, arguing that local dealerships are critical for servicing vehicles, building community trust, and navigating the complexity of vehicle financing, trade-ins, and repair logistics. At the same time, many Ford dealers are grappling with the broader slowdown in EV demand, tighter inventories due to supply chain fluctuations, and changing consumer behavior. Some have reported increased interest in hybrids or used vehicles as affordability becomes a key concern. Dealerships in states heavily dependent on Ford truck and SUV sales, like Texas, Michigan, and the Midwest, have also faced added pressure from production delays and plant shutdowns. Looking ahead, Ford's U.S. dealerships are likely to face continued restructuring. The company is expected to refine its EV certification program further, explore more centralized pricing to combat dealer markups, and emphasize digital retail tools that streamline the customer experience. In this evolving environment, Ford's ability to keep its dealer network profitable, loyal, and modernized will be critical to sustaining brand strength in both urban and rural markets across the country. Ford's F-150 continues to demonstrate robust demand in 2025, reinforcing its position as a cornerstone of the company's portfolio and a dominant force in the U.S. truck market. In the first quarter of 2025, Ford's F-Series, including the F-150 and Super Duty models, achieved a 26% year-over-year sales increase, totaling 183,202 units and accounting for 75% of Ford's total pickup sales during that period. This momentum persisted into May, with F-Series sales rising 17.7% year-over-year to 77,915 units, underscoring sustained consumer enthusiasm. The F-150's appeal is bolstered by its diverse powertrain options, including gasoline, hybrid, and electric variants, catering to a wide range of customer preferences. However, the all-electric F-150 Lightning has experienced a downturn, with sales declining 41.7% in May 2025 compared to the previous year, reflecting broader challenges in the EV market. In response to the surging demand for its Super Duty trucks, Ford is investing $3 billion to expand production capacity in Oakville, Ontario, aiming to add up to 100,000 units annually by 2026. This strategic move highlights Ford's commitment to meeting the high demand for its F-Series lineup, particularly in the commercial sector.